Hey everyone, it's Kate, and today I'm going to give you some tips and tricks for making this Faster 14 quilt. It looks like it is a super difficult improv quilt, but it's surprisingly easy and it just has squares, rectangles, and half square triangles. And I'm making this one out of our Fall 2021 Quilting Cotton Swatch Set. Another great thing about this quilt is that it's fat quarter friendly. So we have created a kit out of fat quarters of the 14 focus fabrics in our swatch set, and a 1/4 yard of this bronze solid as a border, and 5/8 of a yard of this dragon fruit solid as the outer border. The kit is $70. It doesn't include the back, but we used a really nice flannel backing, which makes it a super perfect fall quilt. You need 3.5 yards for the back. So here's a confession. I haven't actually made this quilt, but Elizabeth, who works here, made this one, and Maisie made one as well out of a completely different colorway. And this was Maisie's first quilt she ever made, and she said it was easy. So I know you can do it. I also interviewed both of them extensively to get the tips for this quilt. Let me head over the overhead and show you how to get started. So the first thing you want to do is just press all your fat quarters and trim off the selvages. Next, you'll separate them into 2 stacks of 7, and you don't need to overthink it. They're supposed to be random. The only thing to think about is that stack 1 will become the large half square triangle, the 14.5-inch one. And so if you have a favorite fabric or a large print, like maybe these beautiful pears, you might want to make sure that that fabric is in stack 1. So the next step is to just cut each stack into the squares and rectangles that you start with. Stack 1 is A, B, C, and D, and then stack 2 is B, C, D, E, F, and G. And you might have noticed that B, C, and D are in both stacks, which further enforces the fact that you should not overthink which fabrics are in which stacks. The only change that we made when we were cutting out the squares was to make the the squares that are going to become half square triangles, which are A, D, and G. We made them 1/2 inch bigger just so that we would definitely be able to trim them down to perfection. And the instructions say to cut out all 7 fabrics at once, which is what Elizabeth did with her quilt. If you do it that way, you want to make sure you have a new blade in your rotary cutter, because that's a lot to cut at one time. It worked great for Elizabeth. Maisie cut her fat quarters 1 at a time, which is very much like her personality. I would probably do kind of meet them in the middle. I'd probably make mine in stacks of 3 or 4 and cut them that way. I think you're more likely to be accurate. So let's head back to the overhead, and after you cut all your pieces, you should separate them into piles, and I would mark the piles just to make sure that you don't get mixed up, because some things like the F and G squares are really similar sizes. And the first step is to make your half square triangles out of pieces A, D, and G. And the hardest half square triangle is the giant one, 14.5 inches square, which is really big and kind of unusual. And it's extra long bias edge, and that, the bias edge of the fabric is stretchier than the selvage or the cross grain. And I experimented by sewing one super long bias edge without my dual feed engaged in my machine, and it turned out pretty darn wavy. I think I could probably press this out, but with my dual feed engaged, it didn't turn out wavy at all. So if you have dual feed on your machine, you should engage it. And if you don't, you can use a walking foot instead. It's just really important when you have a lot of stretch in the fabric that both fabrics are being fed through the needle at the same rate. So after you create all your super large half square triangles, another thing is that the pattern calls for all the half square triangles to be different combinations. So you don't do the make a sandwich of two squares and sew them together while they're still square. You're going to cut all of the squares in half on the diagonal and then mix them all up together. But once you have the one that's going to be 14.5 sewn, then the challenge is trimming it so that the diagonals go right into the corner. This way? Okay. A little more? Okay. So trimming it so the diagonals go right to the corners. And you might have a big ruler, maybe a 15-inch square ruler, but if you don't, your cutting mat probably has a 45-degree line on it, and you can use that to cut your triangle. So can you see this edge? Down a little bit. Okay. A little bit more? Okay. All right. There we go. So I have this corner of the half square triangle and then this one both on the 45-degree line. And because I made it slightly oversized, I can trim it I'm using the lines on my mat. This is a really nice Martelli mat. I love that it has the 1/2-inch lines. Whoops. And Martelli really prides themselves on their accuracy. So I'm gonna these two edges, and I am in a slightly awkward position. So pretend I'm doing it perfectly. Trim those two edges, and then I'm gonna rotate 180 degrees. And so of course I had drawn on this cutting mat the 14.5-inch square, but I had to move so that you could see what I was doing. So if both. And then with the smaller half square triangles, you can use my favorite tools. We have a large tucker trimmer that goes up to 13 inches, and that you can use that for your 7.5-inch half square triangle, which looks like this. And then this is the original tucker trimmer, which is perfect. And this is, of course, I have two greens here, which is perfect for smaller half square triangles. So we're cutting this one at 4 inches. So I'm going to have the whole circle in my upper right corner. And I'm lining up my diagonal on the diagonal of the half square triangle. Oops, I'm going to move it a little bit. I have plenty of room here because I really cut it oversized. So I'm going to trim the first two sides. I really love the tucker trimmer. I need to make a video about it, but Deb Tucker of Studio 180 Designs, who designed this ruler, has a great video on how to use it to make half square triangles, quarter square or hourglass units, and combination units. I use this all the time. So there we go. Now there's the perfect 4-inch half square triangle. So after you make all your half square triangles, you just need to look at pages 4 and 5 of the pattern instructions. I forgot to mention that I did not design this pattern. This pattern is designed by Hunter's Design Studios. And the woman who owns it is named Sam, and she makes really gorgeous modern quilt designs. But on pages 4 and 5 of her instructions, she shows you how to lay out all your units, and just take it slow, take it easy. And once again, don't overthink it. The only thing you want to make sure of is that you don't have all the light fabrics in one corner and all the dark fabrics in another. You want to just make sure that you're super random. And also, there's just 2 spots where there's some matching in between blocks, and you make 2 of this shape, and the triangle part is in one block and the square part is in another block. And you just have to make sure that those match and that they line up. And having these 2 shapes really makes it look like you're a magical improv quilter, because you can't tell that there's a seam coming up here because it breaks it up. So I hope you'll give this quilt a try with our Fall 2021 swatch set. If you're not yet a subscriber and you're watching this on the day that I make it, you still have a few days to subscribe to the swatch set. If you've missed the September 7th, 2021 deadline, you can subscribe anytime to receive next season's, which will come with 2 projects and seasonal 5.5-inch squares. So it's a really fun thing, and we love connecting with our customers through the swatch service. I will be back on next Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Mountain Time to make a grain line field bag. And I hope to see you then. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.